Hey, winning couples, it is Robin, and I must say that this conversation we are about to have is one of the most often asked questions to me, and that is my spouse a narcissist? Now, it's a very touchy conversation, and I hope that I handled it with care to help you understand what may or may not be happening in your marriage. So go ahead and keep listening as we dive into this conversation. And remember, over here, we're helping Christian couples win in their marriage. I'm committed to helping you have the marriage that God ordained. All right, let's listen in. Over the last several years, but I don't know what's going on in the last couple of weeks, but this question keeps showing up in my DMs. Y'all know y'all can DM me questions about things that y'all want us to talk about or want me to talk about. This question has shown up in my DMs so many times. And actually, it's one of the most Googled questions, which is my spouse a narcissist? Is my spouse a narcissist? And so I'm about to walk us through this. I'm going to walk us through this carefully. I am going to give you some things you need to consider. I'm going to share with you some things you need to be really careful about. I'm going to help you wrap your mind around what narcissism is. I'm going to even answer a couple of the variation of questions that I've gotten at the end. I'm going to answer a couple of variations of questions that I've gotten. And I pray that at the end of this conversation, you will have some insight into you, into your spouse, and into you all's situation. And so I'm going to go ahead and dive in. I have so many notes in front of me because I want to make sure that I am careful with this conversation, and I'll explain to you why in just a minute about why I'm trying to be so careful with this conversation. So I have to say this on the front end. I am not your therapist, unless I am. Hey, y'all. But I am not your therapist. If you have not signed into my portal, if you have not signed Virtue Speaks documentation, I am not your therapist. I am not your spouse's therapist. And quite frankly, you ain't your spouse's therapist. And so I want you to make sure that you seek support from a licensed clinician. If you are concerned about your spouse having narcissism, or maybe even you having narcissism, I want you to seek a clinical therapist, a clinical professional that can help you know that. So that is my disclaimer. I am not your therapist. I'm not your spouse's therapist, and you are not your spouse's therapist. And in all seriousness, sometimes narcissism and patterns of abuse can go hand in hand. And so if you are in any type of physical, domestic violence, or any domestic violence, please, please, please stop this video, seek some support, take care of yourself, be careful. All right, so let's dive into this conversation. So here's the thing. People often ask, Robin, is my spouse a narcissist? And actually, this is how they tell me. They're like, Robin, my spouse is a narcissist. Half the time, they're not asking me if my spouse is a narcissist. Half the time, they're telling me, Robin, my spouse is a narcissist, right? And so I wanted to first speak to why is this such a common refrain nowadays. The last few years, this has been a common refrain. Everybody, you are a narcissist, you're a narcissist, everybody is a narcissist. Really, we throw the word around way too often, and I'm explaining why that's dangerous. But one of the reasons why this is coming up so much, because social media has made mental health more accessible. Social media has made it more acceptable. Social media has made diagnoses and understanding diagnoses a part of pop culture, a part of our everyday conversation. And so with that awareness, the conversation often comes up about what somebody's diagnosis is. We live in a world of information, and that's really a good thing, because what has happened is that therapy is being demystified. Is it the word I'm looking for? demystify. Therapy is becoming more acceptable, and that's a beautiful thing. But the challenge is when we misuse clinical terms, what we begin to do is create labels, and we begin to put people in boxes, and we begin to create a lack of understanding about what is really happening. So as soon as somebody says something that hurts your feelings, as soon as somebody forgets to call you back, as soon as somebody is a little bit confident, oh, narcissist, this person is a narcissist. And so we want to be careful that we aren't putting everything under the umbrella of a mental health diagnosis, okay? So I wanted to explain what narcissism is and help you get a clearer definition of it. So when you're dealing with a licensed clinician, they will help you understand that in the world of therapy, we have what we call Axis 1 and Axis 2 diagnoses. We can go into 3 and 4, but Axis 1 and Axis 2. And Axis 1 are more of the mood disorders, right? Depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, borderline person. No, that's Axis 2, that's personality. So anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, like those mood disorders are on Axis 1. But then you have Axis 2, which are personality disorders. And under personality disorders, you get things like narcissistic personality disorder. You get things like borderline personality disorder. So one is mood-based and one is personality. And again, narcissism falls under personality disorders. So what is narcissism? Here's a good definition. That narcissism is basically characterized by an inflated sense of self-importance. That does not mean that your man, just because he feels good about himself, or your wife, just because she feels good about herself, does not mean she's a narcissist. Listen to the full definition. Traits like an inflated sense of self-importance, a deep need for affirmation, and a lack of empathy. Those are some of the traits that are categorizing narcissism, right? And often what we find is that when you're dealing with a clinician, what we are looking for are all of the symptoms and whether or not the person meets enough of those symptoms to be officially diagnosed. Are y'all with me so far? I'm about to get to your spouse, okay? I just need to educate you a little bit. And so when we're trying to determine if someone is clinically depressed, we are listening to the symptoms that they are giving us. And we have a list of symptoms and how many symptoms you have to hit to meet the criteria for this diagnosis. Flow with me because this is important. So if I'm listening to you and you're telling me, you know, Robin, I have just been feeling a little bit demotivated lately, and I just haven't been eating as much. I cannot automatically categorize you with clinical depression with just those two symptoms. I need to hear other symptoms over a period of time to determine if you fit the criteria for clinical or major depressive disorder. Or is this moderate depressive disorder? Or are these symptoms really symptoms of bipolar disorder? Or are these symptoms of anxiety? So that's what we're listening for. It's almost like I started telling some of my clients that if they were not old enough to know this reference, I was kicking them off my caseload. But how many of you remember the Soul Train, the TV show? And they would always do the puzzle and they would be dancing, whatever, and somebody would be moving the pieces and you're waiting for them to solve the puzzle. That's what comes to my mind whenever I'm thinking through a diagnosis with somebody. I'm just listening and I'm moving all the pieces to the puzzle to try to get the solve of the puzzle, right? And so when you're dealing with narcissism, you're listening, a therapist is listening if the person goes to therapy. And we're going to talk in just a minute about why a narcissist often doesn't go to therapy, not for themselves. Now, they may show up in therapy for marriage therapy, but that's another conversation. And so we're listening to the symptoms. I want to hear what are the symptoms that are happening, over what period of time does this meet the criteria of narcissism? That's what I'm listening for, right? So here is the thing. I want y'all to lean in with me because this is going to help all of us. I have been saying for all of these years I've been doing this work, I tell people all the time, even if you don't meet the full criteria for the diagnosis, all of us are on the spectrum of something. This is what I have been saying for years and years and years. All of us are on the spectrum of something. Why can I say that so boldly? Because all of us got stuff. We all have stuff. There is a particular personality disorder. I'm not telling y'all which one. Because see, I'm not putting myself out there like that. I put myself on the line way too often. So I'm not doing it today. But there is a particular personality disorder. And no, it's not narcissism. No, it's not borderline personality disorder. Thank you very much. But there's a certain personality disorder, y'all, that I hit so many of the criteria, just not enough to be officially diagnosed. But I demonstrate so many of the traits or the symptoms or the characteristics. And so even when it comes to narcissism, the person you're thinking about, your spouse, may not fit all of the criteria, but it doesn't mean that they're not on the spectrum of narcissism. And again, when I say spectrum, I know y'all often have a thought when we think about spectrum. When I'm saying spectrum, I see things visually. You can ask my clients, honey, I'm always pulling out the whiteboard, drawing something. So I think visually. So I think you may be able to understand it if you think about a number line. And over here is -10, -9, -8, -7, to 0, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. When I'm thinking spectrum, that's what I'm trying to say. You may not be, or just a straight line, you may not be across the board, but you hit enough of the criteria that it feels or seems similar, right? Does that make sense? So narcissism, people might not meet the full criteria for the actual narcissism or narcissistic diagnosis, because watch this. Although we throw the word narcissistic around like it's water, we throw narcissistic, we say narcissistic, gaslighting, and bipolar disorder around like it's water. Do you know that only or less than 1% of the population really can be diagnosed by meeting all the criteria of narcissistic personality disorder? Less than 1%. So is your spouse narcissistic? I don't know. But we're going to keep talking about it, okay? So you may see glimpses of what might be happening. Again, we're talking about, is your spouse narcissistic? By the time I finish this, I'm going to walk you through what it means, what narcissism is. I'm going to walk you through how to respond if you think your spouse is dealing with this. I'm going to answer some of the more frequently questions that show up in my DM. I am going to walk you through all of this, so stay with me. So far, I reminded you, I'm not your therapist. I'm not your spouse's therapist, and you are not your spouse's therapist. So I want you to seek professional support. My goal over here at I Believe in Marriage is to help Christian couples win in their marriage. And we do that by talking about the things that matter to you. So just like this DM showed up in my several times in my DMs, you can send us anything you want us to talk about. I'll go through it. My assistant will go through it, and we will answer your questions. Okay. So you may see some of the symptoms of narcissism, like defensiveness, gaslighting, controlling behavior, but that doesn't automatically mean that the person can be diagnosed with personality disorder. They might be, like we just talked about, on the spectrum of narcissism. I have to be clear to keep saying, when I'm talking about on the spectrum, I'm not talking about autism. I'm not talking about the idea we often have when we're thinking about spectrum. I'm just talking about the idea that you may not hit all of the criteria, but you might hit enough to cause concern. All right. Now, I want to talk about why it's important that we're careful about throwing around those terms, particularly in our marriage. Because when you start labeling your spouse, you stop listening to them. When you start labeling your spouse, you're promoting the opportunity for them to become defensive. When you start saying things like, you're a narcissist, what you're doing is creating a divide between the two of you. You're making your spouse the enemy. Now, listen, you can keep doing that. But by doing that, you're stopping any future healing that can go forth. So I don't want you to make your partner your enemy. I don't want you to throw that. There's a way you can address it. We're going to address it. But I want you to be careful about throwing that out like that. When you start throwing away the terms like narcissism or whatever you're saying, what you're doing is escalating the conflict, not de-escalating it. And if your partner is a narcissist, calling them that isn't going to give you the resolve you think you need anyway. Okay? So instead of diagnosing them, saying you're a narcissist, what I want you to start doing is just addressing behavior. So I want you to say, when you speak to me like that, it causes me to shut down. When you raise your voice, it makes me not want to continue to have the conversation. When you pretend that you're not listening to me, that feels very disrespectful to me. I want you to describe what's happening without trying to diagnose. Now, I understand what's happening. You are feeling triggered. And because you're feeling triggered, you're responding out of that trigger. And I can completely understand that. But I did a video right here where I talked about reasonableness in marriage, and you can go to my YouTube channel to listen to it. But even if you don't do this, I think right before this video is a video where I'm talking about, oh no, it's 2 videos before. And it says, let's talk about emotional intelligence. I want you to go listen to that, because you can keep responding out of that trigger. But when you keep responding out of being triggered, all you're doing is keeping you all in the cycle of crazy. And that cycle of crazy is you're saying this, I'm responding, I'm defensive, you're defensive, and we're not getting any resolve, where the truth is you can step back, be responsible for your emotional response, describe the behavior without giving some type of diagnosis, because the diagnosis, all it's doing is shutting down any opportunity for further conversation. Are y'all with me so far? Okay, so we're about to talk about when narcissistic traits are present, what it will look like, what it will feel like. That's what we're about to talk about. But first, let's do a recap of what we've talked about already. So far, I have told you why everybody is talking about narcissism. Why is this the hot topic? We have talked about what narcissism actually is. I've helped give you a clinical definition of what it is. I've described what it means for narcissism to be on the spectrum. I've told you why diagnosing like that hurts your marriage. So now that we've talked about that, we're about to get into childhood and all that. I told y'all we're going there today. So when narcissistic traits are present, whether the person can officially be diagnosed with narcissism, you don't know that. You don't know that. You have to allow a clinician to do that. But when they're present, whether it's officially diagnosed or they're just showing symptoms that are very similar, here are some of the things you'll experience. A consistent lack of empathy. That's a major one. A consistent lack of empathy. Manipulating situations to protect their image. They'll often be they'll say things. Now, again, let me go back, because I want to keep referencing this, because I take this very seriously. I don't play about marriage, y'all, and I take this very seriously. You don't want to weaponize the things I'm sharing. So if you're listening to this and I tell you a lack of empathy and you say, yes, I knew it. I knew she was a narcissist. That one thing does not equal narcissism. You want to be mature with this. So I'm giving you some traits, but there needs to be more than one, more than 2, to be able to say that that's what you're dealing with. But here's the deal. One by itself is enough to deal with without diagnosing. If your spouse consistently has a lack of empathy towards you, that's enough to deal with. Let's just focus there. Let's just deal with that. Let's just lean in there without even having to worry about if there's a diagnosis. So, a consistent lack of empathy. I said that whole spiel because this second one is really key. Manipulating situations to protect their image. You'll often hear things like, so you're trying to make me look bad in front of. So you always trying to make me, you're trying to make me look bad. You're making others think some kind of way about me. Refusing accountability or twisting responsibility. Often a narcissist refuses accountability or they twist responsibility. This was on them, but somehow they make it about you. A constant need for affirmation, adoration, or validation. A constant need for admiration, adoration, or validation. Gaslighting, causing you to question your reality. Did y'all see how I caught myself? Gaslighting, I was about to say making you question your reality, but causing you to question your reality, because this is why I'm going to give you this strategy in just a minute. This is why if you're a woman and you're not following me on Robbing Me Online, make sure you're going over to Instagram and follow me at Robbing Me Online. And I'm saying that to the women just because I talk so much about you knowing you, understanding you, being rooted in who you are. But that's important for the men as well, because when you aren't rooted in you, when you're not sure about you, what is happening is that you are easily swayed by the wind. And so I want you to understand that gaslighting causes you to question your reality. You can go right here to our YouTube. I did a whole video about gaslighting. Was it on here? I can't remember if it was on my I Believe in Marriage YouTube or if it was on Robbing Me Online YouTube. If you want to know about that, DM me and I'll send you the actual link. Okay. Another characteristic is causing you to dismiss your feelings or telling you that your feelings are an overreaction. So those are just a few qualities or traits that are present in a marriage when you might be dealing with traits similar to narcissism. Do I need to give them to you again? Because you're trying to understand what you're really dealing with. Number one, a consistent lack of empathy. Number two, this person is manipulating situations to protect their image. My children do not care that I'm doing. My children do not care. What's the girl's name? Do y'all know? Do you all follow that girl? I don't know her name, but if you're not a menopausal woman, you may have never heard of it. But there is this woman who has this whole movement. She has millions of followers now. She calls it the We Do Not Care Club. We do not care. My children, they are not in menopausal age, but they do not care. Okay, so manipulating situations to protect their image, refusing accountability or twisting responsibility, a constant need for admiration, adoration, or validation, gaslighting, which causes you to question your reality, dismissing your feelings as overreactions. Those are some of the traits that show up in marriage. So again, there's no need to try to diagnose your spouse. That's not even the point. Can I tell you, I was telling someone today that as a therapist, in order to become a licensed clinician, you go to school, of course, and then you have to do 3 years post-school to post your master's for training. And during that time, you have a supervisor who is helping you develop as a therapist. And my supervisor ended up becoming a really good friend of mine. I respect her so much. And she told me this one time that has never left me. And she said, Robin, our work is not even our work as a therapist. She said, we don't even have to focus on the diagnosis as much. We can just for education, just so that our clients can be educated. She said, our work is to help decrease negative symptoms. And that was so eye-opening for me. Our work is to decrease symptoms. And so we can call it whatever you want to call it. Whatever you want to call it, we can call it. What I'm listening for are the symptoms that are causing distress in your life. And I want to help decrease that. And so if you are married, I don't want you worried about, is my spouse a narcissist? No. If your spouse is not showing empathy, let's deal with that. If your spouse is overly concerned about their reputation to the point you can't point anything out to them, let's deal with that. If you feel like your spouse is invalidating your feelings, let's deal with that. We can call it whatever we want to call it. Let's try to decrease the negative experiences that are happening in the marriage. Whew, I felt that. So here's the thing. I can't tell you whether your spouse is a narcissist or not. What I can tell you is if you are experiencing any of the traits that I just outlined, it is going to eat away at the fabric of your marriage. It is going to eat away at the satisfaction you have in your marriage. It is going to eat away at the longevity of your marriage. And so we need to deal with it. Okay, we have so much more to share. Let me tell you what else we're going to talk about so that you can know. We're going to talk about, I want to give you a little bit more information about narcissism. I want you to understand where it comes from. I'm going to help you understand what you can be looking for when you think about it in your spouse's childhood, what you can start considering and asking yourself or even asking them. Then I am going to talk about, let's see, I made all these notes, y'all. I'm going to talk about why narcissists who really are narcissists, why they resist therapy. Then I'm going to give you practical strategies for how to respond. practical strategies. And then I am going to, hopefully, if I have time, share a few of the questions that people ask me about this, and I'm going to try to answer them as well. Okay, so we got a lot more to cover. Okay, so I've given you a lot of information so far, but I did want to help you understand the root of narcissism. Where does it come from? And actually, narcissism is one of those traits that can be very confusing, those disorders, because narcissism looks like an inflated ego, somebody that's overly confident. People who are overly confident are often called narcissists. Let me tell you this. Now, I'm just going to tell you this. This might surprise you. I just want you to do a quick Google. There are certain careers that a narcissist is built for. That's all I'm going to say. It may surprise you. There are certain careers that a narcissist is built for. And I'm laughing because I've had this conversation with a lot of people in my life, because a few of these careers, in Christ, we're a new creation. So narcissism is often people who are overly confident. We're quick to call them narcissists. That's not necessarily it. But narcissism often looks like an inflated ego. And if you want to know what those careers are, DM me. It often looks like an inflated ego. It looks like somebody who's overly confident. But really, narcissism is a defense mechanism. And narcissism is really rooted in a lot of shame and low self-worth. Yep. It comes out as bravado. It comes out with making it all about you. It comes out in a certain way. And there's a certain such thing as an overt versus a covert narcissist, because narcissism is not always you make it all, I'm all that, I'm everything, everybody look at me. That's not always narcissism. Sometimes narcissism is making themselves the victim all the time and making it woe is me all the time. That can be a sign of narcissism. Study overt versus covert narcissism, but we're not getting into all of that today. So narcissism often develops as a defense mechanism from childhood, right? And narcissistic behaviors often take root when there was a lack of attachment, a lack of love, a lack of safety growing up. The person learned to create a shield and create a sense of self to protect themselves from the abandonment, from the pain, and from the trauma of their childhood. See, a lot of times, if you begin to understand the story that your spouse has told you, if you get quiet long enough to hear them tell their story, things will begin to make a lot of sense. So narcissism isn't just about ego. It's really about protection. And it's often a subconscious plan that the person did. They weren't saying, you know what, I'm going to grow up and be a narcissist. They learned to protect themselves by creating a false sense of self. Somebody say, you teaching, Robin. Narcissism is really a false mask of superiority that was used to protect them as a child because there was such a lack of love, such abandonment, such trauma. So listen, if you've dealt with abandonment, if you've dealt with lack, if you've dealt with rejection, if you don't feel loved, you figured out a way to survive. And that way of survival is still showing up today. I'm not coming on here to preach to y'all, so that's why therapy is really difficult for someone who has narcissistic traits. It's rare that they go to therapy, and I'm going to tell you why in just a minute. But one of the reasons is that it's very hard to confront the pain that created the shield in the first place. And often, because the shield was created so subconsciously, they don't even recognize, they've convinced themselves. That's what I need you to hear. They've convinced themselves. So when you're trying to reason with them, when you're trying to use the word narcissism, they're not even trying to be funny. That's going over their head because they've convinced themselves that this is who they are. That is why you have to deal with the trait, deal with the symptom, and have your own boundaries. Yes, you can have boundaries in marriage. That's why you got to build up your sense of self. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay. So the bottom line is that what people don't really understand is that narcissistic behavior or a narcissistic diagnosis is really a survival strategy. When a child grew up feeling neglect, feeling like they needed to protect themselves, feeling controlled by others, feeling demeaned, they began to create a shield, and it shows up as narcissism. This is not an excuse, but it can help you understand what's going on. Woo! I hope I'm helping somebody. Y'all ain't saying nothing. If you can just heart the video to let me know I'm helping you, to let me know that you're getting some information that is going to help illuminate and help you shift in your marriage. Okay. I'm not done with this part though, because I want to help you know what to consider from your spouse's childhood, how you can be thinking, how you can journal, how you can get to the bottom of, thank you, let me know. I want you to be able to do your own work. You can journal. Let me put a plug in for this. In the arsenal of resources we have for couples, one of the resources is the Can You Hear Me Now communication course. I am telling you what we did. The course is extremely extensive. So what I did is I broke the course down into 3 modules or 3 levels. And the first module, the first level that you can access right away, does this work. It helps you to understand you and your spouse's communication DNA. You and your spouse's communication DNA. In other words, what did you learn about communication growing up as a child? You start asking those questions. You start probing. You start figuring out what was love like as a child. What happened when there was conflict? Did your spouse see their parents yelling and screaming? Did you see your parents yelling and screaming? Or when there was conflict, did everybody withdraw and go into their own corners? How was that handled? How was that handled? That's how you can begin to understand what you're dealing with in your marriage. Okay? Go ahead and click the link and invest in the communication course. Okay. So here are some things to shift your mindset from judgment to curiosity. Judgment to curiosity. Instead of asking, why are they like this? You want to ask, where did they learn this from? Not to them. Not to them. Unless y'all going through the course together, unless y'all are in front of a therapist, or unless y'all have created a space to have this conversation, this is what you're just exploring for yourself. Where did they learn this from? When you shift that perspective, it'll start giving you some information. So you want to start thinking about how did your family members express emotions? Were they allowed to feel sad? Were they allowed to feel angry? Or were they told just to suck it up? Was affection freely given to them growing up, or did they have to earn affection through their performance or through their behavior? How were mistakes handled? When they made a mistake, how was it handled? How were they talked to? Were they cursed out? Were they yelled at? How were they talked to? Did they grow up feeling seen and valued, or did they grow up feeling overlooked? All of these are the things that are contributing to who you married to today. You're not just married to the 45-year-old wife. You are married to that 5-year-old little girl. You're not married to the 55-year-old husband. You're married to that 10-year-old little boy. And if that stuff has not been dealt with, that stuff is in your marriage. Woo, baby. So another thing you can start to explore, you want to start connecting the patterns. So if they learn to suppress emotions to avoid punishment, no wonder they're not expressing emotions in the marriage. If they had to take care of everybody else growing up, no wonder they can become very controlling in the marriage. If they were constantly criticized growing up, of course, when you point something out, they become extremely defensive. If they received love only when they were performing well, of course they need constant validation. If they grew up in a whole lot of chaos, of course they may need a lot of control in the marriage. I hope this is making sense. Somebody needs to say, Robin, aha, amen, thank you, yes. Go ahead and save this. Go ahead and save this video. Go ahead and send it to your group chat and say, y'all look at this. And then tomorrow we're going to talk about it. Go ahead. I got your back. All right. So I told you that when someone is truly a narcissist, they often resist therapy because therapy will begin to challenge their image and their sense of control. And remember, this is a survival mechanism, fight, flight, or freeze. This is survival. So when the therapist starts poking holes in their armor, in the image, and in the control that they need, they begin to resist. I've seen it too many times. I have been doing this for 17 years. When I was working in private practice in person, I've had my fair share of narcissists get up and slam the door. See, if they showed up in therapy, it was often because they were coming with their spouse. And they often were coming waiting for me to tell them why their spouse was so wrong. And as I started poking holes and started asking the questions, I've had my fair share of narcissists get up and slam the door, cuss me out, tell me, and then leave me a message hours later and say, you must not understand. You must not see what they're doing. I've had my fair share of narcissists who refuse to come back because I'm on their spouse's side too much. I can always tell when I'm starting to poke at the armor that is up. And so that is why it's often that narcissists don't come to therapy. And over the years, I have learned even more to be as gentle as possible, to take it one little bit at a time, Because when you understand, remember, we're moving from judgment to curiosity. We're looking at it from a lens of empathy. When you can see this is a 55-year-old woman who's really a 5-year-old little girl. This is a 45-year-old man who's really a 7-year-old little boy. When you can see that, you can have great empathy. Okay. All right, so where are we going next? Oh, here's some practical strategies. We're almost done. I'm going to give you some practical strategies on how to respond, and then I'm going to answer a few of the questions that often come up. If this is helping you, can you do the hearts for me one more time so that I can make sure that I am right where you need me to be? Listen, this always gets uploaded to YouTube, so if you're watching this on YouTube, you can comment below, or you can head on over to Instagram and DM me any other questions you all have. So here are some practical strategies. So remember, the question is my spouse a narcissist? And I am telling you, for most of you, that's not even the question you need to be focused on. What you need to be focused on is identifying what you're experiencing in the marriage and addressing that rather than diagnosing. You want to address what you're experiencing. However, for those who really are dealing with a narcissist, you are married to a narcissist, whether it's a man, whether it's a woman, there is a strategic way that you have to show up in marriage. And I, of course, on this video, cannot walk you through all of that. You cannot. Here's the first strategy. If you are married to a narcissist, you cannot navigate marriage with a narcissist by yourself. You need to run. Don't stop at the red light. Keep going. I'm just, because if you're driving, I'm just using it as an analogy. You need a therapist. Why? Because really what happens when you're married to someone that's narcissistic, you can begin to lose your sense of self. Hear me. Hear me. I've seen it time and time again. You will begin to lose your sense of self. I call it betraying yourself. You'll start to lose you because you're trying to be reasonable. You're trying to consider all the things. And so you need somebody who is hearing you, who is validating, not validating that you're right, but validating what you're experiencing. It's like you need an anchor. You need, as the wind is blowing, you need somebody that you can hold on to that's helping you to see what is happening. So that's the very first strategy. If you're dealing with a narcissist, you cannot do it by yourself. Number two, you have to set emotional boundaries. That is why you have to get a sense of yourself. You have to set emotional boundaries. And yes, in marriage, you absolutely can set boundaries. But you have to set boundaries understanding that when you set boundaries, you can't dictate how they respond to the boundary. You have to be consistent with the boundary setting. So what happens is somebody will say, well, Robin, I did. And then they didn't care. Or eventually I just got tired of doing that. You can't afford that. You got to set the boundary. That's why you don't do it by yourself, because you can't have 20 things. I'm not doing this, I'm not doing this, and you better not do this, and you better not do. You can't do that. You have to really narrow it down. Y'all see I'm getting passionate. Let me calm down. because this is the work I do. So let me calm down. You have to set boundaries, and you have to set them consistently, right? You have to set them consistently. And this is not about, boundaries are not about ultimatum. See, that's where we mess up. When we start making the boundary the ultimatum, we mess up. And here's the thing. Don't even set the boundary if you're not going to stick to it. This is what I have to tell so many of the women that I work with when I'm working with a woman by themselves. Most of the time I'm working with women, a couple of men by themselves, and then couples. But whether it's with your best friend, whether it's with your children, whether it's with your mother, whether it's with your man, if it's with your wife, don't even set the boundary if you're not going to stick to the boundary. So when I'm helping people set boundaries, we're thinking through, can you really do this over time? Can you do this consistently? So if you say, you know what, I ain't saying nothing else to him, I'm not saying anything else to her, well, baby, that's not realistic. So you have to set boundaries. So number one, I said run. What are the practical strategies? Run, and get a therapist. Number two, you have to set emotional boundaries. Number three, you have to decide what's acceptable and what's not for you. What is acceptable and what's not. And that's part of setting boundaries, but you have to name them. What is okay for me and what isn't? Here's the next one. Lean in. Lean in. I hope y'all really are leaning in, because if you don't get nothing else, if you don't get anything else that I've said, this is the one you need to get. Stop debating perspective. Stop the debating. Stop debating perspective. If you are living with someone that is actually a narcissist, remember, I talked about this, but you got to look at the whole video. Only 1% of the population really can be diagnosed with narcissism. But if you're dealing with somebody who's showing a lot of the symptoms, you might be saying, Robin, I ain't a therapist. But honey, a lot of those symptoms you just named is what I'm experiencing. If that's you, stop debating. Stop it. Stop it. What you're doing is giving them the dopamine rush. That's exactly what they want. They want to get off of the moment, the conversation, and get it into something else. It's like they want to distract you from the point and get you over here. Stop debating. When it starts getting into a debate, oh, okay, you know what? I hear you. I hear you. We can talk about it later. Or, that's interesting. Wow. Okay, I didn't think about that. Do y'all see how I'm giving you these? Okay. I didn't think about that. You might want to say, I don't see it like that, but okay. Even that, I don't see it like that, but what you mean? You don't see it like that? You know what? I don't know. Stop debating. Okay, I had to spend some time there. And then let me go back to stop debating. The reason, again, is giving a dopamine rush. And if someone is narcissistic, they like the circular conversations. Like it feels elusive. It feels like you can never get them to admit anything or agree to anything. It feels very circular. And that's the dopamine rush. And so you don't want to participate in that. And then I told you that you have to seek support and strengthen your sense of self. Okay. And so those are some of the specific strategies that I want you to use. But here's the thing. The bottom line is you want to stop diagnosing. You want to stop diagnosing, but you do want to describe the pain point. You need somebody that can help you identify, here are the 2 or 3 things that are really, really eating away at the foundation of our marriage. And I really need some help with that. And when you are dealing with somebody that's showing signs of narcissism, what happens, it gets very cloudy and you get very confused. Like, wait a minute. Am I tripping? Am I crazy? That's why you need to build up your sense of self, right? Okay, so I told you, what are some of the questions what made me do this video is because I've gotten several DMs about this, but here are some of the questions. Robin, how do I know if I'm enabling narcissistic behavior? How am I enabling narcissistic behavior? One of the ways narcissistic behavior is enabled that's the reason why I said stop getting into the debates. When you know that, I'm sorry, I'm getting so many calls. When you know that the pattern is we get into these conversations and it goes round and round and round. We never get anywhere. That's enabling because you already know what's going to happen. You're enabling when you set a boundary, then you don't follow through with the boundary. You're enabling when you are giving in to controlling tendencies just because, you know what, I don't feel like fighting anymore. That is how you begin to enable. Here's another question. What is the difference between selfishness and narcissism? Woo, that's not a hard one. I was about to say it's a hard one. See, selfishness is just one trait over here by itself. And we all have the tendency to be selfish, right? Narcissism is a collection of characteristics that are rooted in a disorder. So just because someone is selfish does not mean they're narcissistic, because you, my love, have tendencies of selfishness. We all have some type of selfishness. And so it is not narcissism when there's selfishness by itself, but selfishness can be one of the criteria of narcissism. Okay. And then these last two are very much connected. What if they refuse therapy, and how do I protect my peace without giving up on my marriage? That last one is really hard. How do I protect my peace without giving up on my marriage? That one's really hard because that's going to take time. I often use the language, don't gaslight yourself. And I've explained several times that gaslighting is manipulative behavior that causes you to question your reality. And it's often intentional. So when I use don't gaslight yourself, I'm just using that to help frame it for you. But it's really you just trying to grasp for an understanding. So I often tell my clients, don't gaslight yourself. It is very hard to find peace when your partner is a major point of conflict for you, when your marriage is a major point of chaos. I'm not telling you that you can't find happiness, that you can't find joy, that you can't find peace, that is not available. I am just saying that it takes great intention. When someone comes to a psychiatrist, they're seeking medication, whether it's for anything, diabetes, whatever it is, whatever medication they're needing. They're wanting something that's going to help right away, right? But there are some natural remedies. There are natural things that we can do to help our mood. There are natural things that we can do to deal with a headache. There are natural things that we can do to deal with our weight. But that takes consistency over time. Natural remedies takes consistency over time. That's the same thing when it comes to your peace. If you're dealing with a narcissistic spouse, it's going to take consistency over time for you to find a sense of self and a sense of peace despite what's happening in your marriage. And it is being okay or accepting the fact that I can have discomfort over here and I can have peace and joy over here. And so what often happens is that people begin, I keep using this term, begin to betray themselves by denying what they're experiencing, not calling it out, not setting boundaries, and not developing their sense of self, and they're wondering why they feel like they're drowning. All right, y'all, I know that was a lot. I hope that helped you. If it did, sometimes you may not feel comfortable commenting on the video because people are going to say, wait a minute, is your spouse a narcissist? So this is one of the ones I'd love for you to DM me and tell me your takeaway. Let me know if you have any other questions. And remember, over here is the place where we're helping Christian couples win in their marriage. I'll see you next time.